没动过什么东西啊。
那这个声音是？
应该是那个网上不要把，对的，线上的。
你把这个关掉，要不然这个声音都下来了。那我点了。它这个外面的好热，它这个这么热，它这边也信号没有。
不用管那个，你就让。
好的。
你这边好吗？
好了，真的好。
这个，它这遥控器怎那个东西呢？
这个没有反应是吗？老师还没有那个共享屏幕吗？
不是，没有，没有插那个呢。
他那个给你插上了。
他给我插哪？啊，插这儿了。好的。
应该是这个。你防万一。
还有，我需要把这个前排的灯关掉。
你防万一。
我要把这前排的灯关掉。这样跳的。
老师用这个吧。
这是已经关了的，这个是整个这个的。
哦，哎，用这个哈，好。
用我的这个，还好多带了一个。
然后这个话筒，老师已经带了那个吗？
带了，
对吧？
他们已经试了，对。
哦，那个是这个。
但我这屋里我也得用这个。So, shall we start? Very sorry for the delay, and it happens when you use technology, and the more technology you use, the more delay you may expect. It's life. Today, we are going to continue to talk about the venue planning of Beijing 2022 and how it implicates, it implements all the sustainable ideas. But today, we are going to talk about a different topic. If the last lecture, we somehow zoomed into the venues and see in the details of the design of the facilities and how this kind of solutions were made towards sustainability. And today we are going to zoom out a bit. If last time it was about methodology, then today is all about teleology. It's about setting up objectives and goals for the making of Beijing 2022 venues. We are going to talk about the master planning and the technological decisions before everything was made in the venues of Beijing 2022, according to the requirements of sustainability, and later based upon the integration of all the SDG elements. So we'll start by a re-look at this. Everyone knows this, right? It's basically these days when you see this colorful small boxes with icons, you know it is what it is. It is SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. It's 17 altogether. In 2015, I think we would remember two things. One is in July, Beijing won the bid for Beijing 2022 Winter Games, and 2 months later, in September, SDG was announced, the 17 goals. And if we look at this very specific design of this SDG chart, shall we call it a chart, and the first row is basically about all the basics of a decent human life. It's the survival of the mankind is fundamentally different from those of other creatures. We need some basic decency, necessities of what is a decent modern life. And the second row are basically concerns or issues related to development. The conditions of what is a healthy development, a sustainable development, including energy, including sustainable communities, equality, economics. And the third role is about the planet. If we, human beings, are to survive on this planet, what kind of footprint are we leaving on the planet? And what kind of changes we are bringing to the planet that may or may not be beneficial to other species. So if we have a basic understanding of this, we know how important it is ever since it was made. But basically, in the past 6 years, time and again, you would see these colorful boxes on all kinds of international conferences. They are a kind of system that people would refer to judge whether all the decisions we make in our daily life are pro or con to the sustainable development. Actually, this is in 2017 in Tsinghua, very early. Tsinghua hosted a symposium on the SDG-related topic. SDG, once set up, has changed the human perception and our definition, our value of what a good life is. From the very consumption-oriented, as the more, the better, the more luxurious, the better, to the more sustainable, the better. This affects our views of the city, this affects of our views on any project we're going to do, and this affects our view of our own lifestyles. For example, when we do movement in the city or on the campus, it used to be the faster, the better. But now it's about slow movement. You would burn your own calories to make yourself from one place, to bring yourself from one place to another. And I guess you already have felt the kind of alignment between the Winter Games, the winter sports, and SDG promoted lifestyle. The Winter Games, they are naturally compatible with outdoor sports, with the healthy life that we are supposed to have, and is like returning to nature. These two are combined only in different seasons in the same place. So SDG actually has brought a lot of changes in all kinds of things we do, including the planning of the city, including the design of venues for big events. And when it comes to effects on a population, on a special people, nothing is more obvious than Beijing 2022. Because in Beijing, we are making this winter game as one possible means of getting people back to nature. And this bringing back to people to nature thing, from the cities to the mountains thing, is actually an inherent cultural gene in every Beijinger, in everyone living in Beijing. And we can trace this back over 8 centuries. So the first, let's look what happened 800 years ago, or even earlier. The historical story of Beijing. We're not going to talk about history, we are going to talk about the geographical history of Beijing. And to be honest, if you learn architecture, you would learn something that would change your way of looking at things around you, is the reading of the city. Every city is a collective achievement of a people that would spread across generations centuries, even millenniums. So a city is a built book of history. If you learn to read the city, you can decipher all the cultural information and genes that's embedded in the constructed reality of the city. So if we look at Beijing from a very early time, this is millions of years ago, when this basic terrain, what we know modern day Beijing is located in, was originally formed in the first place. You see this plateau here, and then a plain. The plateau is about 2,000 meters above the sea level, and the plain is about from 60 to 200. And then there is a sudden drop, and Beijing is right located here. If we zoom in a bit, we see the starting point of Beijing. We know what happened in 2000, since 2,000 years ago, but let's focus on when Beijing became a capital city, and that is 800 years ago, in early 12th century. You see the mountain range here, and you see 4 water systems, 4 major rivers leading from the high of the mountains to the low of the plain and then into the sea in the southeast. And this natural structure is a very fertilizing ground of culture, of history, from the early biodiversity to the later cultural diversity. It forms an implication of nature, from the mountains to the plains to the sea, and is across this axis that you will find Beijing time and again trying to reconnect itself with nature. You know Beijing as a city, as a man-made city with this orthographical grid, with things pointing north and south and then goes east and west. This is true. This is the artificial construction. All the artifacts that is made by people would go this way in Beijing. But there is always an obsession of the Beijingers of trying to return to nature, and this almost always along this axis. If you think about the canal system, if you think about the making of the summer palace, if you think about the making of royal gardens, it's always along this axis. So this is how Beijing started in the early 12th century. We are overlaying the snapshots from history on the current satellite image of Beijing. To give you a reference, here is the very great central axis of Beijing from the very south to the very north, and then here, about here is the Tiananmen and the Forbidden City, and here you see the old city walls of Beijing. This is the Chang'an Street. It gives you a basic coordinate system of Beijing. So Beijing started in early 12th century here. That was Yuan dynasty. Moving to the 13th century, the starting of Ming dynasty, the center has shifted a bit, and then the first artificial water system of landscaping water system appeared in the Forbidden City. This is closing to the end of the Qing dynasty at the starting point of 20th century. You see the old city of Beijing almost as what it is now, and then you see the water systems and the entire landscape across along the Yongding River was remade. So 2 parallel major systems, and this is all the way to the southeast, linked to the canal, the Grand Canal system. This is when the People's Republic of China was founded, and then the inner city has changed, modernized. You see the orthographic grid gradually taking place. And you see the birth of new industry. This is the capital steel shogun. Gradually, when the country opens up, when we have the great economic reform and opening up, the city grows. And this is a world, it is a global effect that when a metropolitan city starts this economic boom, the city grows. You see the growth of the city from the 1980s to the 1990s and then to the early 2000s. This is when Beijing hosted the Summer Olympic Games in 2008. Do witness the system here. So, from the 12th century all the way up to the turning of the 21st century, Beijing was basically growing along the two axes. This one and this one is a two-dimensional growth. But the water system and the landscaping systems remains in the diagonal. There's always some kind of reminder in the urban fabric of Beijing. There's always this axis of nature cutting through the city, reminding people there is nature in the mountains, reminding people there is an obsession of us trying to return to the mountains. And actually in Beijing 2022, in the design of these 3 competition zones is actually an implementation of this axis. If we look at the location of the 3 zones, is reconnecting with nature. It's revitalizing our old tradition of trying to connecting the urban with the rural, the city with the mountain through this diagonal axis. You see, this is the 3 zones. The Beijing zone, located in the city. The Yanqing zone is in the mid-mountain range, and then the Zhangjiakou zone is further into the mountain range. And if you connect these 3, you have that axis of nature. So, the 3 zones as a revitalization of old wisdom of Beijing, of the city. So we started the master planning of Beijing by thinking of this traditional wisdom used to solve current issues, to try to tackle current issues. So let's check what we promised to do and what we have got now. The 3 zones. This was you can say a promotion video during Beijing's bid for Beijing 2022. It's on the master planning. And if you found the voice of the narration familiar, don't be surprised. Oh, there is no voice. Why? Let's check. May I know why there is no sound? Thank you. speaker.
没有啊，线上一直都有声音。
Chinese proverb that states everything is well prepared, especially that which is crucial. Our people are prepared for this moment to create a great Winter Games. The Beijing 2022 Master Plan has 3 zones connected by a high-speed rail and Olympic-grade network, making it efficient for the Olympic family and visitors to travel between zones. As the hub of the Games, the Beijing zone will be the home of the Olympic Park, with the Olympic Village serves as the central point of the Games. Competition venues are immediately adjacent to non-competition venues. Please notice this was made in 2015, so the venues, the specific venues may look different. Within close proximity to the Olympic Park are short tracks, speed skating, figure skating, and women's ice hockey venues. Visitors to Beijing will enjoy the ease and convenience of 2 international airports. A modern high-speed rail system connects the entire Olympic experience like never before. Games guests can board a train near Olympic Park to depart for the nearby Yanqing Zone. The Yanqing Zone is a beautiful mountain setting with all venues located within 10 minutes from the Yanqing Olympic Village. Athletes and guests will celebrate unforgettable moments in these stunning mountains as Olympic history is made. From Yanqing, it's just a short train ride to the 3rd Olympic Zone in Zhangjiakou. Zhangjiakou has been a popular winter sport destination for 20 years. The high-speed rail station is in the middle of this zone, delivering visitors right to the doorstep of all venues within 5 minutes. Imagine experiencing the thrill of ski jumping, freestyle skiing, or snowboarding against the dramatic backdrop of alpine scenery and the inspiration of the Great Wall. So notice how the venues and how they looked different from what they are today, and in particular the ski jump. It used to be for Superman only. Now it is for both the Superman and the common man. So the 3 zones. First, I have, during the bit for Beijing 2022, I used to be the presenter of Beijing 2022 venue planning, and also the head of sustainability and venue plan and technology. One question I have been asked time and again, and particularly by Western media, was that why do you need 3 zones? Because basically all winter games have in about 2 zones. One is the ice sport zone in the center of a metropolitan city, and then a snow sport zone in the mountains. Why do you need 3? Look at this. As we have said before, there is a tradition inside Beijing of returning to nature, and this 3 zone is entirely getting connected through that axis, is revitalization of the tradition. And then, if you think about how this connection can get opportunities, economic development and knowledge through this channel, from the urban environment to the mountain environment, from the people in the city to the people in the mountains, it is basically the better, isn't it? So Beijing 2022 has incorporated the three-zone idea and is deeply linked to the tradition of Beijing, and at the same time aligned with the national development strategy of getting integrated development in Hebei province, in Tianjin city, and also in Beijing metropolitan city. So we have these three zones, and if we have each one of these particular zones, each one is with a specific topic. For Beijing, it's about the reuse of existing resource, and in particular those structures and facilities built for 2008, and also vitalization of the youth, bringing youth back to the physical sport, from the computer terminals, from the gaming consoles back to the outdoor sports. If we look at Beijing, the entire Olympic Park will be reused. The bird's nest will be used for opening and closing ceremonies again. And the national swimming pool, you know, it is called Water Cube. And it's probably the most, with the most names, the venue with the most names ever since 2008, because when it hosted an APEC, and when there is a banquet, it used to be called the Banquet Cube. And then when it's used for ice dancing, it was an Ice Cube. And now it is going to be Ice Cube, because it's going to be for hurling. The transformation from a swimming pool to a very thin layer of ice that maintains its surface to be extremely flat, and the surface temperature of that ice needs to be very critical. This is technologically very challenging, but anyway, Beijing has made it. This is the capital stadium. It's older than me. It was built in late 1950s. It's still very vital, very vibrant in the life of every Beijingers. It used to be a basketball stadium. It can be now hosting the hockey games. The National Stadium, now again for ice hockey, for short track and figure skating. Shogun, at industrial heritage, converted to big air. So Beijing is reusing all its existing resources with only one new additional venue, which is the National Skating Oval, designed by architect Zheng Fang from BIAD. If you are interested, you would want to ask him to give you a lecture, or probably 3 lectures. There are multiple stories about that particular venue. And for Yanqing Zone is about the creative preservation of nature. In Yanqing we have 2 sports, and one is bop or bobsleigh, and the other is downhill. And all of these 2 sports are extremely fast and probably very challenging. You accelerate to speeds in both sports. The athlete would accelerate to speed like over 100 kilometers an hour. And you would want to ask architect Li Xingang from the China Design Institute to give you particular lectures on all the topics inside this region. They did what they could to try to maintain the biodiversity in that mountain area. And by doing this, they actually created more projects and more programs in the natural environment, in the natural preservation project. And for Zhangjiakou, it's about sustainable development of an underdeveloped region. And this is probably the most solid proof of how Olympic Games, in particular how Winter Games, may help local development. Here we have 2 sports. One is freestyle skiing, including the Nordic and biathlon. The layout of the place, the creating of infrastructure, when we do general development plans, when we do constructions in a place, there is always one thing to go first, is infrastructure. Transportation, high-speed rail, highway, they bring people and goods. They make people and goods move around. They connect to the remote places, to the existing centers in the metropolitan cities. And this is the making of this specific high-speed rail station in Chongli. And by the way, this is one of the lowest, probably the lowest in terms of height, high-speed rail station in China. And you know why. You shouldn't block the view and the feel of the mountains nearby if you built a 40-meter or 50-meter tall railway station. The mountainscape will change. High-speed rail and highway, and Chongli, the Jiangzhou zone, is now served by 2 highways and 1 high-speed rail. This is unique in history. And to make sure that one of the highways would be the fastest, to make sure that from the center of Beijing to get to Jiangzhou zone, you need only less than 150 minutes of drive, some specific treatment has been done to the highway, including making bridges, including making tunnels, and also including making tunnels like this. This is the spiral tunnel. The tunnel is not a direct straight line in the mountain. It goes in plan, like a circle, and then it raises, lifted. It basically changes in elevation over 100 meters. So it's like a spiral stair. All of these infrastructures has brought very significant changes to the life of the local people. They used to be in agriculture, in mining industry, in forestry. Now they can do winter sport service. They can have jobs in hotels and ski resorts. And we have a number here. From 2015 to 2020, 12 counties inside the Jiangzhou city, they used to be of poverty to extreme poverty. Now they are lifted above poverty line. And this affects over 1,970 villages. We are speaking of over 940,000 people, almost 1 million people, lifted from poverty. They are currently doing this, operating snow guns and snow cannons, enjoying the opportunities and change brought by the Winter Games. So if we look at the 17 SDGs, then basically the overall master planning of Beijing, the 3-zone idea, has adopted them all. And probably in some aspect, Beijing 2022 has done exemplary projects like clean energy, like life on land, quality education. We will talk about that in this following section. We'll go to some venues, we'll go to some of to check out the operation plan and the technology adopted in some of the venues. First, let's check out the Beijing zone, and we will use this chart. We call it the SDG relevance chart. We used this chart driving our design decision cycles. We check out whether these SDG goals are met through particular design solutions or through particular design or planning decisions. And when these two are closely connected, when there's a strong effect, then we say this is strongly relevant. So let's check out first in Beijing is some particular technology and particular operating ideas that hasn't been done before. And this is something we have talked about in the last lecture. First is the changeable profile of a competition. In the Shogun big air slope, there is this changeable profile, and this is the very first. And it carries out this responsible consumption and production. When you make something, you try to make this something more effective, to be multi-purpose. And this is a multi-purpose competing facility. And then material. This is all about industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Let's think about a question. For winter sport, what is the hardest to achieve in terms of winter sport in Beijing? Snow. During the bid for the Winter Games, I have been asked time and again by officials from IOC, from an international skiing federation, asking about the availability of snow. Of course, we have water, and we have enough water storage, and we have enough technology to make the snow. And actually, all the athletes, they prefer artificial snow than natural snow, because artificial snow is more smooth, is more predictable, and therefore it's better for their performance. But if we take a broader view, if we are to make more people to be winter sport, in particular snow sports fans, we need lots of more snow. And if we think about northern China and think about the climate change, we need more people to be able to play winter sport longer every year, not those 3 to 4 months, what we call the winter seasons. So people are actually doing research on the possible substitute of material. Can we do something that has the same physical features or similar physical features of snow? Yes, we can. Is this guy. This is a particular composite material that has the same, almost the same physical features in terms of friction, in terms of elastic, in terms of tension and pressure characters. And this mushroom-like thing is a composite material, is one piece. It can be made in modules and then made a large flat surface. It might not be good for competition because it hasn't been approved by any sports federation, but it can be used for popular sport. It can be used by the common people. It can even be used for some specific trainings of some specific sports. Remember this material. The time we play snow sport under the summer sun is no longer a dream. Industrial heritage reuse. Again, Shogun demonstrate this. Since the making of the Shogun venue, we see all kinds of changes taking place in Shogun. Sports and leisure activities, commercial events, and even people taking Shogun as a tourist destination. Had it not been the COVID pandemic, Shogun would have been an international destination already. So Beijing zone has already proved all the pledges is made during the bid. for achieving sustainable goals and has shown strong alignment with all the SDGs. Changing to Yanqing zone, I would leave this Yanqing zone to Professor Li Xingang. Again, he can talk about Yanqing zone 1,000 times better than me. So you'd better ask him to do the lecture. There are all kinds, all layers of things, of this sustainability-oriented strategies and solutions. In particular, under this beautiful BOP venue. And in Yanqing zone, all of these SDGs are implemented in the very minute detail, all the way to the smallest structures, like the electric station here. And if we go to Zhangjiakou zone, we see more of these special SDGs presenting themselves in specialized material solutions. The first is the clustered layout. It very well presents the idea of sustainable cities and communities. If we look at the plan, the layout, where the buildings are and where the nature has been left as what it is basically a clustered design. This is an architectural concept. If you think about Tsinghua, or the man-made thing is connected, right? It's basically spread it across the entire flat surface of the Tsinghua campus. Everything is connected. But in Chongli, you see all these man-made villages-like things scattered into the valleys. They are connected by roads, but the built artifacts, they are not connected. So we see these clusters. And this type of clustered layout is actually what you can do, what you can achieve better sustainability in designing for the mountain areas. And what we have learned in doing this kind of design is that designing in the mountains is drastically different from designing in the city, because the city is basically designed in a flat surface, but in the mountains there are available spaces here and there. It's like doing a jigsaw puzzle. You can do something here, you can do something there, but you can't do an entire surface, since by doing that you would destroy the entire ecology in the mountains. So these are the three clusters: the Nordic cluster, the Olympic Village cluster, and the existing Genting cluster, basically three clusters. So if you climb up the mountain and take a look and bird's eye view of the entire competition zone, you see clusters of buildings here and there. You don't see it like a city. Renewable energy. This is very important. I know some of you are doing the energy or related major. The most difficult for energy is not production. In particular for renewable energy, the most difficult thing is storage. You'd better use it when it's produced, or something is going to be wasted, and that is the general challenge. And here in Zhangjiakou zone, we are trying to make the local produced energy being used locally, shortening the cycle of this energy circuit. And this addresses the SDG idea of affordable and clean energy. You know what is in adequate supply in mountains? Solar and wind. The sun is very generous in the mountains, and the wind is very rich in the mountains. So to harness the energy of sun and wind without too much challenge, you can then convert it to electricity and then try to cycle it in the local networks. And that is the idea for Chongli. And another interesting thing is these hydrogen vehicles. Probably you already know there's the so-called green hydrogen energy. It's currently being promoted by the French President Macron, trying to make France the leader of the world in green hydrogen energy. But hydrogen, they don't naturally exist. You have to use some energy to convert it into hydrogen. And then when it's converted to hydrogen, it can store the energy pretty effectively. So each of these electric vehicles, of course, these are the vehicles that will be used in the operation of the Olympic Games in Zhangjiakou. You may even regard them, each one of these vehicles, as a battery. It's clear, right? You produce the energy, but you can't consume it immediately. You convert it into hydrogen into these vehicles, and it carries the hydrogen like a moving battery. So let's do a very broad, sketchy calculation with all the wind and solar plus the local cycling of the energy. We estimate that 20 million metric tons of carbon emission can be saved every year because of the construction for the Winter Games. There's 20 million metric tons of CO2. Another idea, the lifted slow movement network. We talked about the pedestrian footbridge. We talked about the lifted competition facilities from the mountain surface. And this is implementing the good health and well-being idea, as well as the life on land idea. Interestingly, when it's good for human beings, and almost is always, that is also good for other animals. You see the connection footbridge and the competition structure, they're all lifted above the mountain surface. This takes some extra construction to achieve, but the things you get is that the surface of the mountain, the flow of the water, the movement of the animals, they will not be broken. And on this footbridge, it's always great for people to ride a bicycle or to do some running. And there is a post-winter game plan of hosting Chongli mountain marathon every year. Of course, holding marathons these days is a very difficult thing to do. You know this, and I know some of you are marathon fans. If you have 3 weeks without running a marathon, the life has changed. So the restoration of the mountain flora and also swift transit, this is another idea that needs to be carried out in the planning and design, is you arrive in one place and then you change to another means of traffic. You don't need to cover a long distance to do that. At the Chongli high-speed rail station, this has been implemented. And this is about the industry, innovation and infrastructure. Again, this SDG idea. I have to give my full praise to the high-speed rail station in Chongli. The official name is Taizicheng, the Prince Town. And why it is called Prince Town, we will come back to that later. You know, it has been almost a tradition because train stations, high-speed rail stations, they are mostly designed by experts doing train stations. Not all architects can do train stations. And Chinese high-speed rail stations, they are glorious. They are often of greater scale, very big, very monumental. But when they do the Chongli station, after discussions with all the related people and the stakeholders, we came to a consensus that the train station needs to be the lowest in China because of the mountains. And they did exactly that. But to make all the immediate transit, the transit from trains to other means of traffic, extremely easy, they have sunken everything into the ground. Look at this space. This is the large halls you usually see at high-speed rail stations. They have basically made most of the things underground to keep the low profile of the train station. And I have to say, what they have achieved is great. Even when you look from the top of the mountain down, you see the tradition in its very humble, very modest, silent way laying down there in the center of the Zhangjiakou zone. Kudos to that. So, the train station is titled as the Prince Town Station. Why? Because there used to be a Prince Town. It's the 12th century site in Chongli. And this is quality education. We need to educate ourselves through the knowledge about our own history. We know better where we came from, who we are. And by doing that, we can know probably where we are going to. And also the sustainable cities and communities idea. This is the 12th century site. It's not from any Han Chinese dynasty, it's from Jin dynasty, Jin Chao. And it's dated from about 1140 to 1160. And then when you have the archaeological facts checked by historical records, we know that this is from Jin Zhangzong. He used to be a prince of the Jin dynasty, so this is why this place is named the Prince Town. And you have an entire small town, the ruin, the fabric of an entire small town here. This is the train station. This is the local snow town. This is the Olympic village, and this is the site. The preservation and the reuse of the site is also designed by a professor in this university, actually from our school, is Professor Lu Zhou, who is the vice president of the organization under UN for historic preservation. He did this. Is exposing all the traces of the city, the ruins. And you would be able to walk in that city without any building, but only with the traces on the ground, the foundations of buildings that used to exist here. And there are also some cultural relics being exhibited in this temporary museum constructed here. And here you have the Olympic Village. And this space in the north can be used for international events inside the Olympic Village. For example, when you do a national kind of celebration by one country team, some of the spaces can be used. So this is the first time in any Olympic Games we know that the Olympic Village directly speaks to a cultural heritage of a local place. This is the first time. If there is a time that is very close, then it is in Korea in 1988. We all know in the capital city Seoul, and there is a historic site. They call it in Korean, I cannot pronounce it very good, it's like Dongdaemer. It's like the east gate of the ancient Korean capital city. And it was designed by an international renowned architect, Zaha Hadid. But this time is the conversation is direct. You walk out of the Olympic Village and you are in the historical site of the 12th century, all the cultural relics being exhibited here. Minimum footprint of any artificial intervention. This is a principle that has been kept across all the regions, across all the mountain regions of Beijing 2022, from Yanqing to Zhangjiakou. And this, of course, affects the life on land. Take the cross-country venue, for example. The cross-country will be returned to nature completely after the Games. So everything now has been keeping that idea in mind. For example, the making of the snow, the competition courses, there is no pavement underneath, just for a quick recovery to the mountain flora. And there is minimum design of the cross-country venue. The building is as small as it can be to make sure that everything else would be quickly returned to nature after the Games. And we all know when we do these kind of snow ski courses or competition tracks, there is at least some sort of excavation, some sort of land forming is going to be made, right? Because nature, they don't grow natural ski courses. You have to do the ski courses. So there would be some kind of mountain, some land would be cut or made. Then what to do with the cutted land? How to restore the mountain flora? Before Beijing 2022, the general method is to use concrete to protect the slope first, and then to dig holes in the concrete, and then to put soil into the holes of the concrete, and then to grow some kind of mountain flora. They would look completely different, in stark contrast with the natural surface mountain flora. And this time we found a very creative solution, better than anything we know. This is from a firm doing ecological restoration for coal mines in China. We all know China is doing ecological reconstruction, and in China, the entire country is doing that, try to restore nature in all kinds of mining industry leftovers. This is a very creative idea. You learn to live with the force of nature. You don't fight against it. When you use concrete to somehow contain nature, to keep that everything is in place, is solid, you are actually fighting with nature, against nature. But this thing learns how natural plants, like grass, keeps the soil on the ground. Those gentle roots, when they grow inside the soil, they form a fabric. It's like a network of fabrics. They will keep the soil there. The soil becomes more solid, and then larger plants would grow there. Larger plants generate more soils, better holding effect of the mountain surface. And then an entire ecological system would be accommodated there. This uses that idea. It uses a special fabric, very thin layer of nets, to be put on the excavated land, and then try to use some small plants, a special species of grass that can grow in a very thin layer of soil. And when the grass is being grown there, the soil will become deeper and deeper, and more fertilized, and then more plants would grow there eventually. So it's not making the final result, but initiating a process of nature repairing itself. I would say this is a very Chinese idea. If you think about Chinese philosophy, we never fight against nature. We try to live in harmony with nature. We try to learn the forces of nature rather than fight against them. You see the nets here. You see the first breedings of the grass. And this is after 6 or 7 months. This is in autumn. You see the changing color of nature. Nature is already recolonizing this excavated mountain. And the same thing has been used for the cuts that we had and we did for the ski jump. If you zoom in to here, you see that the mountain actually is recovering quite well. Scattered water storage. Again, coming back to the issue of snow, we need more snow, we need to make more snow, we need more water to make snow. For the Jiangsu zone, we need about 500,000 cubic meters of water. The most cost-effective thing would be, if only you calculate the making of snow, would be you build that entire 500,000 cubic meter into one pool, into one gigantic water storage. But this would not be good for nature, nor it will be good for sustainability. So what we did with the help of a landscape architecture professor in our school, Professor Zhu Yufan, we did a series of lakes. You see, along the biathlon, you see these small lakes. It's almost like a chain of pearls, a string of pearls, a small water storage used as lakes. We have 7 instead of 1. And adding the 7 together, you have 500,000 cubic meters. This follows the terrain of nature. And when this pool is full, the water would flow here, gradually filling each pool one after another, following the forces of natural surface water flow. And the biggest benefit is that these can be used for normal day irrigation for the mountain flora. When you build a huge water tank, you can't do it, you can't use it in normal days without competition. But here, it is served as the basic, it's almost as a natural lake and benefiting the immediate environment surrounding it. So it's again learning from the forces and principles of nature. Long-term operations. We don't plan only for the games. We would try to combine the use in the games and the use after the games. This is not only for the facilities, for the buildings, but also for the activities that is going to take place there. And this, of course, implements the responsible consumption and production idea. And this is most typical in the Genting Snow Park. I haven't spoken of Genting a lot during my presentations, but now it is time to do it. The Genting Snow Park is basically reused. The entire resort, ski resort, is reused. 6 competition courses are made in the Genting Snow Park, and some would later be converted to courses for normal ski fans. You see the combination of the competition track, and this is the normal course for normal skiers. So after the games, it will be converted again for the popular skiers. and also everything is overlay. The term overlay means something is temporarily made on the side, then it will be removed or deployed elsewhere. So in the Genting Park, there is almost no permanent building, only these ready-made cabin houses. They are made from, you see these things a lot on the highway. Whenever I see a truck, you see this container. So all of these basically are made from existing containers. And then, like doing a Lego, you put them together on top of each other, next to each other, make some holes, make some windows, make some openings, put the entire piping system in, and it will be used as a building. And all of these structures can be removed very quickly and reassembled and then deployed elsewhere. So the idea of leaving zero footprint in the existing Genting Snow Park is very obvious. And these tents are also temporary. They will be removed after the games. Genting will be returned 100% to its original form, or a better form, for popular skiers after the games. So, it is very fair to say, before we made the design, before we made the plan, when we started the master planning and design for Beijing 2022 back in 2015, when we got this SDG thing, almost immediately the entire Beijing 2022 team has decided to implement it, this SDG agenda, as full, as complete as possible. And I would say probably we made some mistakes, and there are things that we should have done, but somehow we didn't. But generally speaking, I would say Beijing 2022 has carried out the SDG ideas very well. And this is a very exciting thing to do. Today, when I speak to people from other countries or previous planners or designers or operators of previous winter games, when I speak of SDG, the relation between SDG and Beijing 2022, I feel very proud. It still gives me goosebumps. Probably I'm too optimistic, but all these ideas, all these solutions, of course they need to be tested by the real world games and, most importantly, by the life that happens after the games. But I would say SDG is a very worthy topic. And no matter what you are doing, design, no matter you're doing planning or other kind of engineering or research, SDG is a thing to look at and is always a great agenda to follow. Thank you very much indeed.